This is TWiT.
Political misinformation, political disinformation, medical misinformation, medical disinformation. If all of those are starting to form an equation in your mind that comes out to equal Facebook, well, Facebook says you're wrong. According to Facebook, the whole misinformation narrative about Facebook being the place where all of that gets spread isn't true. And Facebook is starting to release some information to let you know what are truly the most popular posts on the site. Joining us to talk about Facebook's widely viewed content report is Engadget's Carissa Bell. Thank you for coming to the show, Carissa.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes. So let's dig right in here with this piece. So Facebook has come out with this widely viewed content report, and they've talked in the past about some of the most popular content on the platform, and as you pointed out in your piece, there are other means of kind of showing what widely viewed content is seen on Facebook. Can you talk a little bit about the tools that others have used to show what content is viewed? Because I think that will help kind of set the scene for why Facebook might be trying to release its own report.
Yeah, absolutely. So for a long time, this is something that people, journalists, researchers, people who try to understand what's happening on Facebook have really been trying to understand for a long time. And that's kind of knowing what's popular, how things are being shared, how content is spreading. So until now, kind of the main way that people have gotten visibility into that is with this tool called CrowdTangle, which is an analytics platform. It's owned by Facebook and it measures engagement. So that's likes, shares, comments. That's how people are interacting with posts that are coming from Facebook pages. So that's kind of the main way that a lot of people have been sort of gaining insight into what's popular on Facebook and how that's spreading. And the thing that a lot of people have found is that it tends to be political content, a lot of sort of these right-wing pundits, Ben Shapiro, that kind of thing, tend to get very wide distribution when you look at it on CrowdTangle. And that's something that Facebook has tried to counter in various ways.
Interesting. So yes, let's talk about Facebook's countering of this, because you point out something really important there, where CrowdTangle is looking at engagement, meaning all of these different means. It's the posts that are getting the most attention. And I think it's been all of our understanding that the Facebook news feed is based on engagement. The posts that are getting the most attention seem to fly to the top. And I can remember I used to work for a news organization, and I can remember sitting through many a meeting with our marketing/social media team talking about how comments coming in at a specific time and then comments coming in later and likes and all of that would affect our ability to be seen on Facebook. So if things still work how they used to, then that tends to be kind of the most important thing. And this is the, quote, widely viewed content report, meaning the content that gets in front of the most eyes. So these two might be a little different, but what is the most widely viewed content on Facebook, according to Facebook?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. They released this report and it had several lists of what they said was the most widely viewed content for, I believe it was the second quarter of this year that they looked at. So they shared, domains, and that was, very expected. It was like YouTube and TikTok and Spotify and Twitter and, things that you would expect that are kind of the most popular sites, probably for social media users. And then when you look at it in more granular detail, you look at kind of what are the most popular posts that are being shared. It's kind of just these really sort of boring memes where people try and ask people to, in various ways, to post, what their least liked food is, or the last thing they just bought, or like these really kind of just mundane seemingly memes, and then there's also some other strange things where there was so the most widely viewed specific URL was a site that was associated with former Green Bay Packers players, and like the actual Facebook page associated with that only had a few thousand fans. So it was like this kind of obscure website that sort of left a lot of people scratching their heads about why why this rose to the top of everything.
Yeah, that one was really fascinating for me too. I thought, that's interesting that it made it. Now, one of the things that you mention in your piece is that Facebook's widely viewed content report is specifically for public posts that are completely public on the site versus or posts that are not marked as available to the public. So that could also have an effect on what posts are getting the most views, the most engagement, because some of the largest groups on the site are also going to be bringing in lots of engagement, but may not be available to the public. You've got to kind of prove yourself to join the group. At the same time, you say in the post that, or you kind of talk about Facebook saying that more than half of posts that users see in their news feeds comes from their family and friends, not from pages or groups they follow. So Facebook is really seemingly trying to suggest that not only is political content not the most popular on the site, but also most people aren't seeing the content of these pages that often get quoted or shown by way of CrowdTangle as the most popular things. Am I reading that correctly or understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that that's something that they've really tried to emphasize. They've made a lot of changes to newsfeed over the last, year or two that are really trying to, get at this message of, Facebook is mostly family and friends. Mark Zuckerberg said in January that they want it to be less political, that they're going to try and make some tweaks to kind of reduce the amount of political content. So they're really just trying to say most people are seeing, posts from their family and friends. They're not seeing news. They're not seeing posts from pages. They're not seeing kind of this inflammatory stuff that a lot of researchers and people who study the data that's in the past been made available would suggest is, really kind of spreading widely. But I think it's important, and I think you kind of got at this earlier, to point out that we don't know exactly how Facebook is slicing this data. We don't know how they kind of arrived at this specific list. We don't have a lot of information on, for example, what they consider to view or how they're categorizing these things. So, there is some room to, to think that maybe there could be more information about kind of how they're giving us this new data.
Yeah, and that's something that, it seems to be kind of difficult to sort of get to the bottom of there as based on what Facebook has said and hasn't said about how it's getting the data. Now, do we know, is this going to be a yearly report like the reports that show when a government kind of requests information? Is this going to happen more often? Has Facebook said the rate at which it will publish these content reports?
I believe that they've said that these will be quarterly reports and that these will be released, every quarter at the same time as they release their community standards enforcement report, which is a separate report that they also gave us yesterday that kind of just details how they're enforcing their various policies across the platform.
Understood. So we will be able to keep an eye on these things and see what posts continue to be the most popular there. It's interesting given that Facebook just recently, I think there was another case to deal with antitrust and some of the ongoing concerns that different governmental bodies have had about Facebook's role in misinformation, both for the vaccine and in elections. I know that this is ultimately just what Facebook has put out there, but do we see this as a response from Facebook to sort of educate the masses on what is truly, or what it sees as truly going on at Facebook, or is this kind of a thing that you think they would have normally released had they not been kind of accused of the misinformation and disinformation?
Oh, no, this is absolutely a response to some of these larger narratives around Facebook that we've been hearing about for a while. Specifically, there's been so much reporting on polarization on Facebook, how Facebook kind of fuel these fringe groups, extremism, conspiracy theories, all this kind of stuff. And that's been a really damaging narrative for Facebook. They've really tried to emphasize that that's kind of just a tiny slice of the platform. That's not the experience that most people have. But it's been hard because every time they make the argument, journalists and researchers, they come back with this kind of crowd tangle data, and they can say, look, this is what's getting the most engagement. So, and that's been really problematic for Facebook. So I think this is really them attempting to kind of reshape that narrative, put out their own data that kind of shows it in a more, if not a more favorable light, at least a very different light than what we've seen in the past.
Well, it will be interesting to see if the next report involves what is something you will never eat, no matter how hungry you get, or if things change over time. Carissa Bell, I want to thank you so much for joining us today to talk about the widely viewed content report from Facebook. Of course, folks can head to engadget.com to check out your work. But is there anywhere else folks can go to follow along with what you're doing?
On Twitter, I'm at Carissa BE on Twitter.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you.